Oh, hello. Welcome to Model Aviation Live. You caught me taking a look at my airplane here. Sorry about that. And happy St. Patrick's Day to you. If you're watching us live, happy St. Patrick's Day. I am wearing green today in celebration of that. Um, in a few minutes, we're going to bring out our guest. It'll be Jon Porter that's with us today. And he's from Micro Aces. And this airplane that I'm holding here is actually one of his kids. So in just a few moments, we'll have him on the show to chat a little bit about what goes into making these and what might be upcoming in the future. But before we do, there's a few things I'd like to share with you. Oftentimes, I like to share on the show about interesting aviation things that I've collected personally. In the past, I shared with you that I have a World War I cockpit watch or a rib from an airplane that was in the movie Wings. And the most recent thing that I picked up that's interesting is an autograph of Ernst Udet. It's an autographed book. Now, I realize that some people may not know who Ernst Udet is. If I was to ask you who was the highest scoring ace of World War I would think that probably at least half the people would say the Red Baron. But if I asked you who is the highest scoring ace that lived through the war, you might not know. And it's Ernst Udet. He was the second highest scoring ace next to the Red Baron, who actually lived through the war. And being a big World War I fan, I had the opportunity to get his autograph. The book that it's in is actually a sketchbook. He was also an artist, and he did a lot of aviation sketches. So this book was a book that he published after World War I of his aviation sketches that he then signed. Since I got the book, I've had it certified that it's authentic. If you don't know, if you collect autographs, you can have companies such as Beckett, and there's a PSA and a few different other companies that will take a look at your item and certify it as if they believe it's authentic or not. So I did have it certified, and it was certified as being believed to be authentic. Ernst Udet had quite a career after the war. He flew in many air shows in the United States and was involved in a lot of air racing. He supposedly, it's said that he was able to pick up a handkerchief with the wing of his airplane. So obviously, that would be quite impressive. There's actually at the Dayton Air Force Museum, that's only about an hour and a half from AMA, there's a piece of an aircraft that he had shot down in World War I, and he actually gave the piece of the aircraft back to the pilot who he met at an air show after the war in the United States. He gave him the aircraft piece back, and that now resides in the World War I section of the Dayton Air Force Museum. So just a little bit of history if you don't know anything about Ernst Udet. From a modeling perspective, he flew a Fokker D7 that had like a candy striped pattern on the wing, red and white, and it's quite commonly modeled. Many times at dawn patrols or events, I've seen his airplane. So even if you're not familiar with him, you may be familiar with that. The next thing I wanted to mention to you is that we're going to be doing a review on the new slow ultra stick. And that, I think, to some degree was born out of what we used to refer to as ugly sticks back in the glow days. Not that we're not still flying glow, but that's where I first flew ugly sticks. And then more recently with electric planes, we had the slow stick, which is what you're seeing now on screen. That's the GWS slow stick. I had one of those. I got my father back into flying thanks to a GWS slow stick. So I think that was one of the early electrics that utilized the stick platform. And from there, one of the other companies, Millennium RC, made a airplane that was similar to that. It was kind of the next step. The Millennium RC airplane was kind of the next step of what eventually is leading to the slow ultra stick. So I had some experience with that as well. Millennium RC was started in Florida, and I lived in Florida before I moved to AMA. So I did know the owner and built some of their airplanes. I believe we have a photo we can share of some of the Millennium RC airplanes. So the one in the back in this picture is basically their take on the slow stick, and it's a built up and covered wing and tail. The two planes in the middle are ones that I personally built, not the ones in the picture, but I built those, a monoplane and a biplane. And interestingly enough, when I built the monoplane, I did it as Ernst Udet's color scheme, as I just talked about. And I still have that airplane. I've actually shown it on this show in the past. So it has the white and red stripe on the wing. So basically, I went from the slow stick to this, which would be a little bit more, I guess, modern or advanced. But now Horizon Hobby just last week announced the slow ultra stick, and that kind of takes this technology to a very easy to assemble, maybe 10 minutes out of the box, and it's fully assembled. So I'm excited that we just got one of those yesterday in the office. And so I'm going to personally review it myself, just because I've had some experience in the past with other stick type airplanes. Basically, the tail and the wing are held on with thumb screws, and the landing gear plugs in. The motor, speed control, receiver, and servos are already mounted. So it's literally maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and that's ready to fly. So you'll be able to look forward to that in a future issue of Model Aviation. I'll have a full review on the airplane and let you know what I think about it. I'm excited about it because of my experience with the previous versions of stick aircraft, but I'm also excited about it because oftentimes I fly scale airplanes, which obviously, while not overly difficult, take a lot of attention, and you've got to be fully focused at all times on it. And I'm kind of excited to fly something a little more beginner friendly, maybe, or easier to fly, just because sometimes we all need that relaxing flight, or we want to share the flight with others. Horizon calls this a good second airplane. They're not calling it a beginner's airplane. It does have AS3X and SAFE. So if you're interested in that airplane and you want to find out more, obviously you can look at it on Horizon's website, but we'll have a full review in Model Aviation. But without further ado, let's get our guest on the show. I'm really excited to welcome Jon to our show to talk to us about micro ACEs. Hi, Jon.
Hi, Jay. Nice to see the Curtiss P6E Hawk taking center stage there.
Yes,
that must be about 8 or 9 years old now.
Yeah, this was in Model Aviation magazine. This actual airplane, this one I'm holding, was in Model Aviation, and I believe Joe Malinchak had it in his column. And then he said, "You got to try out micro ACEs." So he sent it to me. So not that they're hard to build, but I didn't even have to build it. It came in a box, ready to go. And
that's really good.
I was so excited to get this. I have to tell you, Jon, because I'm a fan of biplanes. I like biplanes more than any other aircraft, and the P6E is just a classic. And so I was really, really excited to get it. And what you've done, with these airplanes is phenomenal, and the way they look, just I mean, I think about having something this detailed. When I really got into electrics a little over 20 years ago, I mean, it would have been unheard of to have something this small and this detailed. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I mean, we definitely want to dive into micro ACEs. But let's start out, Jon. Tell us a little bit about your background in the hobby, and when you got started and how you got started.
Yeah, well, it was my dad's fault, really. Not that he was a modeler himself, but when I was about 5 years old, he was going away on a business trip, and to keep me out of my mother's hair, he bought me a little. It was a little plastic kit. I think it was. I seem to remember it was a tank, like a little sort of, or a personnel carrier or something like that. And apparently, I set to and built it. I did go to Mum and say, "Mum, can you give me a hand with this?" And showed her the instructions, and she handed them back and said, "No, you'll have to wait till your dad's back." So, but anyway, I presented it to him, and that started me off on a model building lifestyle, really. Certainly up to the age of around about 15, 16. Now, I really got into the aviation. I don't know whether it was because I also had a fascination for birds of the feathered variety that I was introduced to by a neighbor who had a pair of binoculars and a garden full of various different birds, and I just thought small flying things were fascinating. But I sort of continued down the vein of building Spitfires and Messerschmitts and Corsairs and that sort of thing, purely plastic kits. And they'd go on the shelf in my bedroom, and I'd hang them from the ceiling, and I'd look at them, and the only thing that I could do was really sort of pick them up, and normally something would fall off then, and you'd have to glue it back on, and they'd need a bit of dusting as well, and that would normally knock an aerial off or something like that. And it was frustrating that when they were built, I couldn't actually do anything really positive with them, and I always imagined them sort of flying around the garden in my 8, 9 year, 10-year-old mind. So I set about building stick and tissue then, and rubber powered, and found out that was that 15 seconds of flight was and then pure destruction was more rewarding than building and putting on a shelf. So I set about sort of building scale kits, gliders, non-scale, just so I could get some airtime. I didn't have the money or the resources to go radio control, but my dad used to take me up to the airfield that was local to us, where the radio control model club was, and I often had a go on some fairly nasty cheap stuff, but it kind of sort of got me hooked. I then got into radio control cars and that sort of thing, and then unfortunately I became legal age to drink, which is a lot lower here in the UK than it is in the US, and also started to become attracted to girls. So modeling sort of took a back seat, really. But that's how I got started, and that's how I got hooked. So I had a good sort of probably 9-10 years of modeling before I sort of went away and did other things and went to university and got a real job and all that sort of thing, and only really came back to it I guess in my early 40s, and that's when I decided that I wanted to make it a career as well as a hobby. So yeah, that's the way it went.
So when you were building the plastic models, like you mentioned the Spitfire, for example, were your early days in plastic modeling, was it World War II subjects that you were interested in, or did you build all types of airplanes?
Yeah, I avoided biplanes because they were difficult to make. They were fragile, and as I did with, I tried to avoid helicopters as well because they just seemed so fragile. But I'm just trying to think whether there was a. I don't think there was a biplane in the mix there at all. Yeah, I mean, that's I mean, when we as micro aces, when we first started, we started with Second World War aircraft, which were the profile aircraft. I actually I taught myself to fly radio control sort of in my I think I was probably 39, 40 at the time. I needed a bit of distraction because I'd had a business that unfortunately fell foul of the sort of the big financial crash in 2008, and sort of take my mind off it. I thought I would indulge into the hobby that had entertained me from the age of 5 upwards. So I went back and thought, well, I can go with the radio control now. I have the resources, and in fact, it isn't as expensive as it was relatively to do. So I got back into it and taught myself to fly, and then decided that I would start building my own aircraft. So that's what I did.
Wow. So how long was it from when you got back into the hobby till you started your company? It sounds like it was fairly quick.
Yeah, it was about 18 months.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally, it was like falling in love all over again.
Well, we've got a really nice comment here in the comments section from Daryl. He says, "I really love my little Landis SE5 from Micro Races. Just
Oh,
wish it
excellent.
was cheaper to ship here from the UK."
Yeah, well, I've got a bit of an announcement coming up later on next week about that. So I think we're having a bit of a partial amnesty on shipping, because it
Excellent.
seems to be getting more and more expensive. So I thought we'd have a little window where people could get it cheaper. So I'll make an announcement. So if people want to sort of place some orders and get some cheap delivery, because I think I was looking at the stats actually prior to coming on, and it's about 60% of our business is supported by you guys, by Americans. So thank you ever so much, all of you, for that. That's absolutely amazing. I know there are a lot of you, which is great, but and the hobby seems to be very, very healthy in the US as well. So, but that's great.
So, John, what year was it that you started Micro Races?
2011.
And your first products were World War II, you mentioned. And I
Yep.
think you have some examples you can show us of your first product.
Yes, we have. So we won't get in trouble. I'll mask the the detail at the back there. But this is the Foxwolf 190. We did it in several liveries, and as you can see, it's a two-dimensional aircraft. We actually used some very lightweight sticker material to cover it, and inside is a 3mm Depron, which is doubled up on the fuselage. You can see the white edges there. A lot of people actually covered up those white edges with pastels or paint or that sort of thing. But yeah, they were interesting flyers. They had, well, this one still has got its brushless motor within. You can see the magnets having the effect there, and it utilized the Horizon Hobbies little receiver that had the onboard linear servos on, and that sat in a little hatch on the side there. You can see it's not in there at the moment. And then there was a little electronic speed controller that sat that side, and a hatch for the battery, and it all contained in there. A bit of a squeeze, but it got in, and then off you flew. And they were 4-channel. They had little servo just here with a special arm that we created to centrally control both ailerons. So I can just move that there. You can probably see the aileron moving. And yeah, they were great fun. They did really well initially. So and also obviously the Ubiquitous, it's lost its nose cone, but the P51D, and this one is Cripes a Mighty. So yeah, all good fun. Which was yeah, Major Preddy.
Yes, right, George Pretty.
Yeah.
Joe Malinchak is on with us. He's the one that gave me the Hawk that I showed earlier. He said his World War II models were all beautifully done and flew well.
Brilliant. Yeah. I really enjoyed flying them. They were fast. They were interesting. They were more sort of park flying than indoor. You had to have quite a big indoor field to fly them. But yeah, they worked really well. And we did others as well, of course. I got in trouble with the late Queen because I hadn't produced a Spitfire by then, so I had to produce one of those. And of course, we had to go with it was a Mark I Spitfire from the Battle of Britain. We had to have its adversary, Messerschmitt 109E. So we had one of those too, and I think we did a Russian MiG-3, and of course we did the Curtiss P6E, which was probably my first biplane. There we go, first biplane I designed.
So I have your first biplane.
You have the first biplane I designed. Yeah, I've got about 3 or 4 of them at home on the shelf. I tried a slightly bigger scale as well, but that definitely needed extra power. So yeah, that was a really intricate model to design. But the artwork that I did for it, to represent the aircraft on the sides, that took a good while. I learned a hell of a lot using Photoshop, producing that, and I think I did sort of down to the rivet detail. Not that you can see it when it's flying, but what the concept, I think, probably with Micro Aces, is that you've got an aircraft there that you can display on the shelf as much as you can fly in the hall or out in the park. So I've got one here. This is obviously we eventually decided that the profile warbirds would be put to bed. Their the demand for them really wasn't as strong as we'd hoped, or it didn't build as we'd hoped, and they were quite expensive to produce as well. We had a lot of injection molding and stuff like that. So when it came to ordering more injection molding stuff and making further investment, we thought, well, let's try another tack. Let's do something different. And I think I'm glad we did, really, because we went to, and of course we had a lot of people saying, could you make three-dimensional stuff? We don't, we would buy it, but it's two-dimensional and it's kind of expensive, and we'd prefer it if it was three-dimensional. And so we came up with, I mean, this wasn't the first one we did, but it's a good example. This is the Newport 17. And so we've now got a three-dimensional aircraft with lots of detail. It looks really fragile, but they are not actually particularly flimsy. They're certainly a lot stronger than stick or tissue. And we've got, I mean, things like this. The machine gun is very flexible, so if you tend to, with a short nose, you tend to land it on its back eventually. This isn't going to break off anytime soon. And you've also got details like I picked one that doesn't rotate, but the rotary motor itself actually spins with the motion of the prop too. Yeah, so we're very, very much pleased with how these turn out. And of course, one of the reasons that we did World War One aircraft was because the fuselages are very boxy, and there aren't too many compound curves. So that means that the materials that we'd sourced and we're using, this is a 1 millimeter Depron that we use here. It's not actually Depron. That's a brand name, but it's exactly the same as Depron. It's a closed cell foam, but it's 1 millimeter, which I don't think Depron ever did. It's pretty strong. It does bend and crease now and again, but you can get those creases out by running hot water over the crease, and we can print onto it. And I think that's one of the advantages certainly one of our unique selling points, is this ability to print on the parts before they're assembled. And we can, obviously, because we're digitally printing, we can get some really, really fine detail, down to rivets and getting in things like rib lines that you can see on top there. And we vac form things that are a little more complicated, like the cowl here. This is just a vac form piece that you paint before you assemble onto the aircraft. So these are very much more indoor aircraft. Will fly a lot more gently than the profile warbirds that we did, so they're sort of really ideal for indoor venues. And certainly in the UK, the indoor venues normally tend to be quite small. They might be village halls, they might be gymnasiums that are maybe sort of 4 or 5 badminton courts big. So there's you've got to have things that fly fairly slowly, fairly gently, and that fits the bill really well.
So obviously, you mentioned one of the main reasons that you released World War I models because they're boxy fuselages. But I'm assuming you were also interested in World War One in general.
I once again I fell in love with the construction, because when you put something like this together, you've got to do an enormous amount of research into the aircraft themselves, and so you get to know more and more about the aviation in World War One, and it didn't take long for me to be absolutely hooked on the subject. So it wasn't hard to then to do. There are so many subjects that you can do. But I do like doing justice to them. So it takes a lot of time as well. And of course, when you're running a business, sometimes time is against you. And you've got to get the next product out. You've got to keep things going. You've got to keep the money rolling in. And this place doesn't come free of charge, unfortunately. And the big green monster machine behind there, which is the printer, you can probably see just behind my head, sort of with the computer on top there. That's the UV printer that prints onto the foam. Of course, the foam itself, if you try to put foam through a normal inkjet printer, the ink just rolls off because it's hydrophobic. But with a UV printer, the ink's almost like a UV cured glue, and it sprays the pigment on, and it also bathes the whole thing in a UV light at the same time, which cures the ink immediately, and it sticks directly onto the foam. It's pretty difficult to get off as well. You've got to scratch it pretty hard to remove it. So that sort of equipment. But World War One aircraft, definitely now a firm favourite of mine. So.
Well, what you said about the printing process, I mean, obviously the details, as you said, are amazing. So, generally speaking, how long does it take to print one model?
Well, we actually, when we print, we print these sheets of the 1 mil Depron, which we actually get from Japan, of all places. I term it as an exotic material. It comes from Japan. So and we get sheets which are millimeter wise. That's nearly a meter by 650 millimeters. And so that goes through the printer, and we get as much on there as we possibly can. So it might be that we print 8 wings at one time, and it gets printed, and then we cut up the parts that are on there. The digital image usually has a frame around it. We use that as a guide to cut it, and then each one is exactly the same, and they get loaded into the laser cutter one after the other to cut out all the parts. I've got an example here. This isn't actually the foam. This is the plastics that we use. So this is actually from the Dragon Rapide. So this is a polyester plastic, which is used for things like, you can see here, the struts. You've got the tail wheel. There are other sort of struts, bits and pieces, some blank areas that are obviously internal stuff as well, and that gets put into the laser cutter and comes out like that. So all the parts now are ready. They've got little tabs holding them in, and they're ready to come out. And you can see here the detail that you can get with even the rigging has been laser cut on the parts as well. So it's an amazing process. But it takes a while. So each kit, I mean, something like the Newport would probably take in total, if you were to sort of add up the bits of time that took to print and then laser cut the Dapron parts, or print and laser cut plastic parts, or all of those sort of bits, then you're probably looking at around about 45 minutes per kit to bring it all together. So yeah,
So John,
it does take a bit of time.
So John, for those that are watching, or might be watching this later on YouTube or Facebook, and they haven't built one of your kits, take us through a little bit about what's required. What tools would someone need? What basic skills would they need if they wanted to build one of your kits?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because a lot of people got attracted to our kits by the way that they look. They see them and they think that interests me. And we did have quite a few people who were outside of the hobby, but they were into their plastic modeling or something like that, and thought, hang on a second, this looks really interesting. And so they would ask me, right, well, how do I go about building something like this and flying something like this? And which one would you advise that I made to train myself to learn how to fly radio control? And of course, because they're all scale models, the the answer was, well, there isn't one really. It's the sort of thing that they're really designed for people who are already building, already flying, and that sort of thing. So after I was asked this for the umpteenth time, I thought we really do need to create a line of kits that are great for starting a journey with micro aces, albeit if you've got radio control experience, but you've never built in foam before, or never built in micro aces, foam and plastic before. Or if you've had no experience at all and just want to get into the whole hobby and start the adventure. So we came up with the Scrappy, which was actually just a design that I put together to try and actually, there we go, to try and enable people to learn, to learn to build, to learn to fly, and learn to repair as well. The great thing about building your own aircraft is that one you know what you've invested into it. So if you do crash it and you do break something, there's more incentive there for you to actually repair it. And also, obviously, if you know how it's gone together in the first place, then you can probably effect a pretty good repair. But obviously, I wanted something that was really simple to fly as well. It's just a 3-channel aircraft. I've got one here actually. This is the one with the floats. We've gone crazy with them because they became so popular. This is our Scrappy Marlin. It's exactly the same fuselage for each model, but the wings and the tail changes, and also obviously the undercarriage with the Marlin. You can actually remove these. They're actually attached via a little 3D printed bracket to the undercarriage leg, and you just swap out the wheels come with the kit as well. You swap it out, and you can pop these big bush wheels on too, and it's pretty simple as well. I mean, obviously, the fuselage itself is nice and easy to put together. These parts are really simple to attach, and you've also the hatch comes off. It's magnetically attached, and everything you need to get your hands on is in there. And you've got the plug there for the battery. The battery then velcros into the lid there. The lid goes on, and off you go. So pretty straightforward. This one as well, we've actually got little LED lights on too. So I'll plug it in so you can see them light up briefly. So there we go. We've got some nav lights. We've got our little anti-collision light, and under there as well, it's not on at the moment because it's actually on a switch. You've got a little landing light too, which shines right through the prop, and you get this lovely spinning lit up disc at the front. So yeah, it's lights up like a Christmas tree. So that's from a model perspective, that's a great way to start with micro aces, scrappy. Although if you are an experienced modeler and have plenty of confidence, then the SE5A is also a great aircraft to start with. I've got one here somewhere. So this is one of several liveries we do. This is a post-war scheme, but we do, I said, 3 or 4 different SE5A kits in World War I schemes too. And this particular kit is fully supported with not only the assembly guide that comes with, which is really well put together. I don't do it. That's my business partner Simon, who actually puts those together, and he's actually a professional technical illustrator, so he's really good at it. But this is also supported with an entire series of videos on our YouTube channel that takes you through the entire build. So the idea being is that it'll provide you with technique, tips, hints, tricks, etc., on how to actually put this together successfly, so that, you know, after you've spent all that time, effort, and energy on putting it together, it actually flies. Yeah, so that's a good aircraft to start with as well, if you've got a little bit of experience. Foam to foam glue is our go-to now. It used to be Yoo-Hoo Pour. But we did some work with Deluxe Materials, who are a UK company, and they introduced us to their new formula, foam to foam, and it's much better. We've also one of our fantastic customers came up with the idea of this this concentrating nozzle, which is this bit here. It's an extra piece that goes onto the glue itself, and it reduces the size of the nozzle, so you can get a real fine bead out from the from it and get much more control. So that works really well too. So the glue is an essential part. With the glue, I suggest lighter fluid, because the lighter fluid melts the glue. So if you make a mistake, you can always dissolve the glue with the lighter fluid. Usually you just use a little brush or something like that, just brush it on the joint, and it releases the glue. It doesn't melt the foam, and it doesn't affect the print either. So it's absolutely fantastic. So it's the only kit I know where you can actually take backward steps. It's like having a Control-Alt-Delete for your build, or Control Z. So you can actually take steps backwards and rectify any mistakes or just some adjustments that you want to make. The other essential tool is a scalpel, a nice sharp one. This is a Swan Morton classic Sheffield steel, which we like to use here, but any surgeon's tool was do the trick, and a rather grubby, well-used sanding stick or nail file, and that's quite useful as well. In fact, probably pretty much essential to the build. Apart from that, I mean, you know, the odd things that you have lying around, so a ruler, steel rule, or a straight edge. And I've recently found a rather intriguing tool, which is used for. I bought it in a hobby shop. It's just 2 sort of ball bearings on either end, different sizes, and it's very good for getting in, smoothing things out, and applying pressure gently to seams and that sort of thing. So that actually works rather well as well. Not essential. And until I got this, I was using the back of my fingernail to do the same sort of thing. But yeah, that's really there's not a lot required to build them. And the great thing is that they don't make a great deal of mess either. So it's the sort of thing you can do on the dining room table because it's small, or on a tray in front of the TV if you so wish, which I did a couple of years ago. I had I got COVID, and I was isolated to the living room, and I sat there with a tray on my lap and built a Bristol F2B. So, but yeah, so that's sort of that's the way to get into to micro aces really, and then you can then get on to some of the more sophisticated models that we've been able to produce, as my experience really has increased, and my skills have increased. I've been able to produce things like the Albatross, which is actually this is a larger model. It's a 1/20th scale, whereas the others we do are 1/24th scale. And we've got some beautiful detailing here. All of this stuff here is 3D printed. It comes as a kit in itself that you put together, and you paint like a plastic model. And you've got 4-channel control on this. The ailerons operate from a pull system that is centered in the middle of the fuselage, and you've got your control wires that come out through the wings, because these wings are have a thickness to them, and come up much the same as it did in the original aircraft. Come up from the bottom wing to the aileron and control it via a control horn on the aileron itself. So, and this is actually a brushless powered system. It's still 1S, and it flies amazingly well. In fact, when I first flew one of these, I was astounded myself that I'd been able to produce something that flew so well. So most happy with that. And once again, comes in a couple of liveries. I'm sure we'll do more as well, because there were some beautiful aircraft that were produced with various different liveries painted in the field, essentially, to the pilot's requirement and design. So yeah.
Well, John, you're not the only one drinking from a Micro Aces mug. Cliff Harvey says he's watching this drinking from his mug.
Thank you, Cliff.
So we talked a bit about, you just went through some of the building techniques. Again, for someone that's not familiar with your kits, your models, John, take us through some tips for flying them. Maybe someone's not flown indoors before, or they haven't flown a micro model before, or a scale model. Can you give us just a little insider tips that you've found to be successful when you go to make that first flight with a Micro Aces airplane?
Well, I always find, and certainly when I'm maiden an aircraft that I've built for the first time, I try to do it outdoors on a calm day, so there are no walls that I'm going to hit, and the only thing that I can possibly hit is soft grass, or maybe, if I'm very unlucky, come in contact with a tree. And that's why I've got an 8-meter pole with me as well. But yeah, I always try and do that. And I usually, even before that, I'd do a couple of glide tests. So it might just be in the bedroom, onto the bed, towards the pillows, that sort of thing, just to see whether it has any tendency to go one way or the other. Certainly when I do my first maiden, I try a few taxi runs as well, just to see, because these little aircraft, some will ground loop at if you sneeze, and so I'll just sort of check that out, and usually if they are a little bit of a beast to handle on the ground, I usually throttle up pretty quickly and try and get in the air as quickly as possible. So I can sort of bring it under control, as it were. But certainly when I've been at home and just been waiting for the weather to calm down so I can maiden, it's usually scooting it round the conservatory floor, or even on even on carpet, to see how it reacts, just to sort of get used to it on the ground, before I take it airborne. And when I'm in the air, I'm usually so glad that it's actually flying, that I completely forget what the plan is, and just have fun. Until it comes to a gracious end, or a terrible end. So
Well, I think I'd be curious. Take us through just kind of a high level overview of how this comes about. Like, for instance, where do you get the idea for your next kit? Is it feedback from your readers, or I shouldn't say readers, like your customers? I'm thinking magazine, of course, but your customers, or is it things that you're interested in? And then, generally speaking, I mean, just ballpark. What's the process? I mean, is it 6 months, a year? I know you've probably got to make some tweaks and do a little testing. So just give us kind of a high level of the process of when you come out with a new kit, how it comes about.
it varies, really. It really depends on which way the wind's blowing, really. Some of the decisions were made. Certainly, the First World War aircraft that I produced was the SE5A and the Fokker D7, and they were produced at the same time. The reasons that I did those two was, firstly, I knew World War One aircraft were the way to go. A lot of research and interaction on RC groups helped with that process as well. And so the two were decided because they were pretty straightforward as aircraft to design. So they were pretty simple, and it obviously took probably around about 18 months to really get those aircraft to the point where I thought, yeah, these could be a kit. And thereafter, it's been a combination of talking to people, getting ideas, museum visits as much as anything. I mean, our most recent, the Dragon Repeat, the de Havilland Dragon Repeat, which unfortunately has been delayed until next month, when that's what we're working towards, to get it out there. I actually, the Shuttleworth Museum in Bedfordshire, they have the particular model that we first done. They have the real version now, and it still flies, but it's in the museum as well. And I walked into the room where it is with probably a couple of dozen other aircraft, but it just had such a presence. When I saw it, I thought that is an aircraft I have to model. That, it is just so terrific, so amazing that it has to. And indeed, actually, quite a lot of inspiration has come from the Shuttleworth Museum. It's quite frequently visited by me because they have 3 shows a year, modeling shows a year, and we try and go to all 3. We don't always get to go to all 3, but the great thing is, if it's raining and there aren't many people around, you get to go and visit the museum, and they've got some terrific aircraft there. If I could, I'd just sit there and model them all. Another interesting way that we have produced aircraft before is that I ran a little competition. Well, not a competition, it was sort of an ask to our community what they wanted to see next. And there was some parameters. It had to be single engine, it had to be a First World War aircraft, and we sort of just got an idea of what people were thinking. We then narrowed it down to, I think, about 5 or 6 aircraft. And I just went and gathered some images from the internet, posted them on Facebook, and said, right, get voting. And the 2 things happened from that. One, the Airco DH2 was the aircraft of choice, which for me looked the most challenging aircraft to model in 1/24 scale, because it hardly has a fuselage and the rest of it is just a bird cage. So there was that. So I got to learn a lot in creating that. It's not a kit that we do at the moment. No, we actually discontinued it. The reason for that, and the reason for discontinuing a few others as well, is that we didn't have a satisfactory manual for it. And we also decided that we were going to sell our kits through retail as well. So we discontinued those that didn't have manuals, didn't have all of the sort of things that we thought were needed if we were putting our kits in a retail setting. So we'll no doubt bring it back at some point once we get that material together. But that was the one thing that happened. The other thing that happened was that I was contacted by an individual who was quite unhappy that I had used one of their images, which was apparently copyrighted, in the Facebook post. Of course, I just went onto the internet and got it. Anyway, I profusely apologized. Obviously, you know, we do stuff that I wouldn't want people copying. And I said, you know, what can I do? What do you want? And he said, a Fokker D7, please. So I sent him the kit, and I said to him, look, you know, in the future, because this was a while back now, in the future, we're going to need some artwork for our retail boxes. You obviously are an aviation artist who's really good at the First World War stuff. So we kept in contact, and in fact, Anastasios Polychronis, I think that's how you pronounce his name, actually designs all of the artwork on our retail boxes now. So which is really nice. So yeah, so actually deciding what to build next really comes from a lot of different sources, conversations, seeing stuff, just being inspired by things. The other thing I really enjoy, apart from obviously designing aircraft, is finding new materials to create these kits from. I know traditionally models have been made from balsa wood and tissue, and you know, I've made my fair share of them that way. But I love the fact that there are discoveries to be made in using different materials to bring these aircraft together. And of course, one of the things that we have to be very mindful of when we are creating these kits is that they've got to be super light. The way that you get a really good small model flying well is to make sure that it's not heavy. So finding new materials, and one of the examples here is I'll bring the Albatross back again. The fuselage there, that's not made from foam. In fact, you couldn't do that with foam. To get that sort of curve, you'd have to score it on the inside, and then you get these sort of jagged lines all the way around. But this is nice and smooth, and we've been able to do that. It actually comes flat packed, this aircraft. So all of this material here starts off its life as a flat material, and that's actually something called Tyvek, which many of you will have heard of. It's a product that's been around apparently since 1955, is when DuPont actually first created it or patented it. But it hasn't been used like this in aeromodeling. And it's something that I discovered probably 4 or 5 years ago and have been itching to use. And it means that, I mean, the Dragon Rapide fuselage and nacelles are completely Tyvek, foam covered in Tyvek. So you've got an inner frame. The only thing that you have to do is it needs a little more support. So it's not foam, it's not as lightweight or flimsy as tissue. It's somewhere in between, and it's really tough as well. Really difficult to tear. It's what they make the wristbands when you go to festivals and that sort of thing. The things that take ages to pull off. That's Tyvek. They do ripstop envelopes as well. Those envelopes that you try and tear and they just and you can't do it. They're made of Tyvek. They wrap houses in Tyvek. They use them as biological and chemical suits, and they use them in medicine and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really readily available and pretty low cost material, but it works really well. And it also accepts a print from a UV printer, which is fantastic because that ticks all the boxes for us, and it laser cuts really well as well. So yeah, new materials are really important to me as well. I love the sort of the discovery, and then the all the ideas that start sort of popping out about how it can be used. And in fact, the Tyvek, not only is it good for using as a covering, but in fact, and we haven't done this yet, but we will in the future. Is it actually, if you wrap it around a foam spar, that foam spar is almost as strong as a carbon fiber spar, but it's lighter, and it also means that you don't have to make allowances for putting a carbon rod into a wing. You just have the spar, and it's just laminated. So that's really interesting as well. So lots of things, and also electronics. Electronics are coming on now, have been for ages. We've kind of been in the dark ages really, because we've been using coreless motors, but they still have their place, I think, certainly in the lightweight area of modeling. And in fact, our electronics providers have just brought out a new coreless motor, which is almost twice as powerful as the previous version, which is extraordinary. So we're going to make use of that too, and stabilization systems as well. So we've just brought out a range. They're arriving next month of SR3X stabilized receivers, which are on our website, and you can basically plug them in using an interface. You plug them into your USB port on your PC, and you bring up a little program, and you can make all sorts of changes to them. You've got 2 levels of stability that you can change. You can reallocate servos and ports as well. So if you don't want that to be an aileron port, but you want it to be a rudder port, you can change that over. So it's the flexibility for something that is that big is astounding. So yeah. And the other thing that we've been doing is 3D printing, resin 3D printing. So we can actually produce little. My focus isn't working particularly well, but the detail that we can get on these resin printed figures now, and they're completely hollow as well. I think it's half a mil, a quarter of a mil wall thickness. So they actually only weigh about a gram each as well. So yeah, lots and lots of really interesting technology that's enabling us to produce these aircraft, which is fantastic.
So once you've settled on what the airplane is and you begin your development process, I know it's different for every airplane, but ballpark, is it 6 months? Is it a year? How long does it take before you have a finished product?
It as you said, it can vary. The Albatross took about 2 years, but in between that, we do other stuff as well. The Dragon Rapide has taken quite a while to get to that stage. But in the meantime, I've been developing some other things as well, which I can't say anything about at the moment, but will all will be revealed fairly soon. So yeah, I mean, I have developed aircraft within 2 or 3 months, and some have taken a hell of a lot longer than that. But usually that's because, of course, because we're a small business, I'm not only involved with designing, but on a normal day, you can see me at the bench there, packing kits, and with the tape, wrapping stuff up and slapping labels on and going down the post office. And so there's at the printer. We do have a wonderful guy, Neil, who comes in on a Monday and a Wednesday, and sometimes a Friday, and helps out. He actually came to us during the sort of latter stages of COVID, and he'd come up to the factory where we are with his wife. There's a something called a scrap store here, and they have lots of makers bits and pieces that are donated to them. They support charities, and they sell this stuff on to people who have hobbies. And he came in here, and he's a modeler, and he was absolutely fascinated with what we do, and said, "Do you have any jobs?" And I said, "What sort of rate are you thinking?" And he said, "Oh no, I don't want paying. I just want to get out of the house." So that's to say, he has, he can take what he wants really from here, kit wise or any other, but he doesn't. He comes in and he helps out, and which is extremely helpful. And he's now the expert on the laser, so he mans the laser like there's no tomorrow. And our laser cutting has the quality has gone sky high since he's done that. In fact, both Simon and I get post-it notes from him whenever he's here, just giving us instructions on what needs doing now. So we're really being looked after.
Well, in the comments, I noticed that Dogfight Apparel is here with us. He said he almost finished his Micro Aces Newport. So obviously, if you need some apparel when you're flying your World War I airplane,
Yes.
Micro Aces is a good place to get it. Or, I mean, Dogfight Apparel, excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have spoken before, I believe, some time ago. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we put some of his apparel in the magazine in the Worth Coaster Look section. It's really nice hats and shirts.
Yeah, I think I'm linked up on Facebook there, and I see their posts come up now and again, and they look. It's really good stuff. It's really good stuff.
One of the other things that I wanted to touch on with you, John, while we're chatting, because I think maybe a lot of us in the U.S. don't really know, could you give us just a little bit of insight on how aero modeling is doing in the U.K. and, if you're dealing much in the way of any kind of restrictions, or, just give us kind of a picture of how aero modeling is there.
I think really true aero modeling in the UK is sort of it's more within the sort of bracket of 50 and over, or 45 and over. It's not really something that the kids are into anymore, and also a lot of the shape of the way that people buy has changed as well. Obviously, we're online. We sell online. A lot of other suppliers and box shifters supply online now as well, and that has seen the demise of the hobby shop. There are very, very few radio controlled hobby shops around now. The ones that are there are absolutely brilliant. They're proper destination shops. They're the sort of thing that you get excited as a boy at Christmas to go and visit. I think that the modeling scene as well. Although we have a little Sunday group that comes together. It can be very small Sunday group, because it could either just be me or a friend of mine, Steve, or it could be, we've had sort of 5 or 6 people that come together on a Sunday morning, and rather than going to church, we just pray for good weather, and go to our little cricket pitch, which has a horseshoe of trees around it, which protects it really nicely from most breezes. So we go flying there on a Sunday morning if weather permits. And now and again, we do have the young kids come up and really enjoy watching. And we've had a few that have come up and have actually taken the next step and come and bought from us and learned and flown with us, and which is really, really nice. But I don't think there's a lot of that going on at the moment in the UK, which is, I mean, with the models that we do, they're under 250 grams. So there aren't that many restrictions. If a park, certainly where we are in the UK, I believe if a park doesn't want you to fly radio controlled aircraft, they actually have to put up a sign saying, these are the restrictions for this park. And it may list all sorts of things, but one of those might be flying drones or that sort of thing. Drone usage or drone offences are always newsworthy over here, and I think quite recently somebody was prosecuted for flying a drone very close to one of the Battle of Britain Memorial flight aircraft, endangering it and that sort of thing, and they were quite heavily punished, I believe. As for the restrictions, of course, if you're over 250 grams, then you've got to you've got to be registered. You've got, your aircraft has to carry your code on it, and also you've got to take a little test as well, which it's actually worth doing the test anyway, regardless of what you're flying, so that you know the restrictions that are there. So it's quite straightforward if you know what you're doing. But of course, you can just nip down to any electrical store and buy something that you can unbox and throw in the air, without any restriction whatsoever. So, you might be breaking the law, but it's always difficult to police. But I'm not the best one to ask, because of course we always stay below the maximum weight for little toy aircraft. It's not difficult if you have a place that you go. Even though ours isn't a flying club, so to speak, it's just us going to the park and flying these very small aircraft that you'd probably be hurt more if you were hit by a sparrow than you would one of these. It's the hobby itself does need a bit of a boost in the UK. That's for sure. We always look to America and think, if only it was like that here. But maybe we get a sort of a rose tinted spectacle view of it. I don't know.
Well, I think where, generally speaking, wherever anyone's located in the world, I mean, every country has certain regulations or whatnot. Like obviously here, if we're over 0.55 pounds, same thing. We have to take a test. We have to register and all that. So, I think it's probably mostly similar. But it's really been fascinating to talk more about your products and get some insight into air modeling. I'm always curious to ask someone such as yourself. I mean, obviously, you started your business out of a love of the hobby, and since 2011. So I'm curious to ask you, looking back, from now back to 2011, Jon, what are you most proud of?
I think keeping it going for so long. that's, that's it, really. I think I often come into work, and it's one of those things that I love coming into work. I love this room, and it's probably because it's filled with really nice looking aircraft, and sometimes I have to pinch myself to realize that actually I built all of them and I designed all of them, and and I think having the opportunity to do that, to be able to actually sit down and do those designs, and be able to bring them to the market and to the aero modeling community. That's really what I've found most rewarding, and I'm probably most proud of, is that I mean my favorite aircraft is always the aircraft I'm working on. It's funny, really. We year before last, we were supposed to have a school reunion as we all turned to 50 from my old buddies back at school, and it didn't happen because of COVID. So we started using Zoom to have because nobody was going anywhere. So we used to grab a beer, get on Zoom, and have a sort of Friday evening chat, which I missed to come and talk to you. But we were talking about we talk about all sorts of things, and but one of them was sort of when are you looking to retire, was the question. And people would say, oh, I've got such and such arranged, and probably by the time I'm sort of 60, 62, 63, I'll be sort of financially stable enough to step away from the business. And it came to me, and I just said, I don't want to retire. I want to keep doing this. I just, I've got so many things I want to design. The list is endless of what I'd like to create. Moving forward from First World War to Second World War to Cold War to even up to current, and also the other thing that I really like doing, probably actually weirdly, one of the things that I'm proudest of is the Scrappy, which is something that I set about to design something that would be easy to build and easy to fly, and a proper introduction into micro scale modeling, and it seems to have worked. It's our most popular kit. I think it's pretty much outstripped in sales wise any of the others, and it obviously it's not just for people who want to learn. It's just a good sort of rat to fly around. It's you're not too precious about it, and it's great fun. And with the new motor in, you can even do some pretty snappy rudder rolls with it as well. So I think and then the variety that we've been able to create from that one platform. So we've got the Scrappy biplane, we've got the Stagger wing, we've got the Marlin with the floats, we've got it with the lights on. We've got all sorts of different designs for it. We've got one that looks like a little grasshopper military aircraft, and and all sorts. And so it's that's been really good, and it's also introduced a lot of people into the hobby that may not have got into it otherwise. So that's probably something that I'm pretty proud of.
Well, I have to ask you, where did the name Scrappy come from?
Because I initially created it, or created the parts from the scrap bits of material that came off of the other kits that we were making. So, and I thought it was quite apt because it's kind of it gets in there, and it can get dusted up a bit, and it can take a few knocks, and but it's still willing to get in the air and keep going. So it's scrappy.
It's perfect. The perfect title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's been an amazing conversation, and I want to give you a chance. I've covered a lot. We've covered a lot in over an hour. But is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would. I'd like to introduce the boss of Micro Races to you, if you don't mind, if he's awake.
Sure.
So this is young Percy. Who's that? Percy? who hasn't had his walk yet, so he's grumpy. But yeah, he keeps us distracted during the day, always wanting to play ball or tug of war.
Does he go out to the flying field and watch the flying, or the park?
Yeah, well, I take him out to the flying field, but he thinks we've gone there for a walk. So after he's seen me take the aircraft out of the box and get it in the air, he goes for a walk anyway. So he's not much interested in the aircraft themselves. Thankfully, we do get a lot of people getting their dogs well exercised at the flying field as they're sort of chasing the aircraft around, and we're all praying that our batteries last long enough.
Sure. Yeah. They're durable, but probably not that durable to be a chew toy.
Oh no. No, it's been great, Jay. At last to be able to talk to you and come on the program, and it's been a great chat. Thank you for the opportunity to tell everyone about Micro Aces and probably wax a little bit too lyrical about the only thing I know about now.
Well, I found it to be a great conversation. We've had a lot of great comments. Greg Gimlick wrote, "Exceptional guest, Jay." I mean, several people were very excited when they heard that you were going to be on the show. And, obviously, as you said, 60% of your customer base is here in the U.S., but obviously this show can be watched anywhere in the world. So
Yeah.
very excited to have you on and learn more about the products. And obviously we got a little bit of sneak peek. There's going to be some interesting stuff upcoming, and discounts on shipping you mentioned. So a lot of great things came out of the conversation. So very glad to have had you on. And obviously we've showcased your products in the magazine. Joe Malinchak a lot puts things in his column, so we're excited and happy to do that and continue to do that, and look forward to these announcements that you kind of hinted at.
Yeah, we're really grateful for Joe's support. He's been a one-man whirlwind with our products, and he's just such a great builder. And his own stuff that he builds is just remarkable. It's mind-blowing, in fact.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We're great. We're really grateful that he's a fan.
Absolutely. I also want to remind everybody that our next show is April 21st. Friday, April 21st will be the next show. We'll obviously announce the guests prior to the show. So again, happy St. Patrick's Day, and look forward to seeing everybody again next month.